Thanks so much for staying with the McAllen Cable Network. I'm Roxanne Ledema. We are back in the studio today with yet another edition of Inside the PUV. And who better to help us out with that than our own trustee of 13 years with McAllen Public Utility, Charles Amos. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Roxanne. It's a pleasure to be here.
So it's always a pleasure to talk water. Water is life, and we have the best water in the city of McAllen. So what's the latest?
Actually, we do have the best quality of water.
See, I wasn't lying.
we meet or exceed all state standards, so that is something that we can take pride in. I guess the most important thing is the latest and greatest is we're currently in the process of finishing a complete renovation of our what used to be called wastewater treatment, but now it's water reclamation plant.
Oh, I like that, water reclamation.
And that's not being politically correct. That's actually what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay.
We completed some years ago the North wastewater plant and continue to utilize it. We had it built with expansion and growth in mind, and currently are utilizing it very efficiently. We're looking at many other things to that, but the most important thing, in addition to not only about being about 50% complete with construction on the south plant, and we do have aerial videos of both, so if you pull it out of your archives, but the north plant, we're coming back and retrofitting just the few items that are necessary for us to provide type 1, and this is type 1 class reuse water.
So for folks that don't know reuse water, they think, oh, reuse? What's it mean?
What reuse means is, as most people should understand, we get 90+% of our water from the Rio Grande River.
Right.
And we're dependent on both the lakes, Amistad and Falcon. And of course, we recently dropped our mandatory water conservation because the lake levels have reached 55%, and they've maintained that. And I should say 55%. Last week it was 51%. There have been some major inflows into Amistad's area. So that having been said, that's where our water comes from. We take the water from the river. It's delivered by irrigation districts in most cases, and it's delivered to our water plants, clean it up. We normally will produce an average of about 22 million gallons of water a day for the citizens of McAllen and the others that we sell to. When it was real rainy, yes, it was down at 14, and it's difficult for us, but our average, and currently, the last number I heard, we were at about 35 million gallons of water a day.
Yeah, it's been slightly hot.
Well, higher usage, once again, higher demand.
Yeah.
However, we have the water capacity to do so. We have the water rights to do so. Unlike other communities in the valley, when they have such a high peak demand, they're unable to meet it. We have a capacity to produce almost 60 million gallons of water a day.
Wow.
So we have that capacity to go ahead and do it, even though other cities might be straining to be able to produce that amount of water. We're capable of doing it, and currently we have contracts with neighboring cities that we do sell wholesale water to them so that they can meet the requirements of TUCQ and the other regulatory boards that we adhere to.
We share.
But yeah, we're trying to, the most important thing, we've got to sit back and start looking at things regionally. We can't sit back and with the Friday night football mental and this is my turf.
Right.
We've got to think beyond that, because if we don't, funding won't be available to do bigger and better things. And then most importantly, the citizens of the valley and the growth of the valley, which is dependent on water, won't continue. So that's what we're planning for in the future. We're looking at a small expansion of the water plant on the south side where we have the additional raw water to use. And then in the future, down the road, we're looking at expanding the north plant. We're looking at additional water wells to diversify our portfolio. And then we're also looking in the future, and we're talking about 5 to 10 years, desal. And that would be desalinization of groundwater using reverse osmosis. And each time you take those steps, it's more and more expensive to produce that water. So we're trying to make ourselves as efficient as we can and then get beyond that. But to get back to reuse, reuse is taking that same water that has been sent through the system and it's returned back. And at the water reclamation plants, we are able to clean it up, actually make it cleaner than it was when it came out of the river. Biologically, with suspended solids, everything.
Okay.
With the exception of some dissolved solids, such as salt.
Right.
So we can produce that water and it actually visually looks cleaner or as clean as tap water.
You said it's just one little tiny step below drinking
water.
water.
There are two additional processes that would have to occur to that water to make it what is called, in terms in the industry, direct potable reuse or potable reuse, where you take that water and actually utilize it for drinking water. But reuse allows us to take, to replace potable water that is actually being used for irrigation, watering the lawns, etc., and substitute the reused water for that potable water so that we actually have that water as a reserve.
Great.
For the growth of McAllen. So rather than the higher demand being on the potable, we're supplementing it with the reuse, and the demand and pressure goes down on the potable side. It almost sounds like semantics, but basically you're taking the water you've used once and reusing it for another purpose.
Well, it's a good trade-off.
And at certainly a reduced cost to do so. Currently, we buy water at about, I'm going to say the average is about $2,400 per acre foot.
Okay.
It's a lot of money when you start talking about the amount of water that we use. So we're looking at, we sell potable water at about $1.35, sprinkler water at $1.85. We have a little bit of a scale. And we want to encourage people to continue to use water smartly. Let's not run it out in the street for 2 days. Let's put it on the lawn.
Yeah.
Let's use it wisely. But we have that capability to provide them with that water. Reuse will substitute it. One of the biggest projects that we're now working on is the ongoing development of Tres Lagos. Tres Lagos is a planned community that is in North McAllen. That they are requiring their residents to use reuse water for all of their lawn sprinkling.
So that's a requirement for them?
Yeah.
Wow, for the
and
entire
so
development.
we will be selling reused water to them at a reduced price. We haven't set that price yet, but industry throughout the world in the industry, it's at a reduced rate from potable water in most locales. However, San Antonio sells it at the same price. It's just the way they've set theirs up.
So they're going to get lucky if they get it a little bit lower in McAllen.
Well, we have found that we are capable of producing it at a cost-effective way.
Great.
Currently, we are the largest user of reused water and the largest supplier of reused water. We provide about 1.5 million gallons a day to the golf course.
Wow.
Or are capable of doing it. The golf course, Palmview, also has other sources of water, potable as well as irrigation, that they sometimes use, depending on what their operating costs will allow them to do. We sell about 2 to 2.5 million gallons a day to the power plants, Calpine and Duke, that are up at McCall and Monte Cristo. They use it in their cooling towers rather than using potable water. Which is less expensive for them. It's as clean as potable water, so they don't have the drawbacks of using raw water or irrigation water, having to let it settle and a rudimentary amount of filtering so that it doesn't degrade their equipment. So now we're looking at increasing the capacity to supply reuse at the North Plant and a higher quality to where you don't have the additional concerns or regulations that would require making everybody aware that it's less than type 1.
Okay.
With type 1, you don't have any of the biological concerns, you don't have any of the concerns that you might have otherwise from the source of that water. There's a few things we have to do at that North Plant, including a distribution line, a long line out to that location, which is about I want to say it's about 4.5 miles from our plant. But in doing so, we will also run a major distribution line south to the new ball fields that are being developed by the City of McAllen.
Wow.
So those fields will be able to be irrigated with reused water as needed by them at a much lower operating cost for the Parks and Recreation. Parks and Recreation is the #1 consumer of McAllen water.
Yeah, because of our beautiful parks.
Well, we have a number of different sporting complexes that,
Right.
that require the fields, and of course for the safety of those that are using the fields, they need to be kept in a specific manner, and McAllen's been very good at doing that.
Yeah.
So that distribution, we will be, we're talking about the initial phase of development at Tres Lagos will be in 2,500 acres of homes, and of course the A&M campus.
Right.
And
There's a whole lot going on over there.
We're talking about homes, multifamily. We're talking about commercial development. We're talking about some industrial
Right.
and
They're gonna have their
development out
parks
there.
and their lake and their,
And
yeah.
even industries can utilize reused water. So our capability is going to be able to produce about whatever our inflows are. That currently that plant's running at about 5 to 8 million gallons of water reclamation a day, and we'll be able to produce that as reused water to those that are in the service areas that we're achieving. We're going to be doing the same thing off of the south plant. Once we complete construction, provisions have been made in the design and the construction so that we can fully distribute the reused water from that plant. That main trunk line will be running up essentially from the south plant up 29th Street to the Convention Center area and to Westside Park, and will be utilized for irrigation in those areas as well as a couple of schools on the way. We plan on, at least in our distribution studies, to continue to extend to areas that would be high users of reused water, school campuses for schoolyards. And the best part about reused water is it's essentially drought-proof water. It's water that
Well, we need that
everybody
in the
uses.
valley.
It's water that everybody uses. It returns back. We
Let's use it
reclaim the
again.
water and use it again. So if we drink it or use it for washing or anything else, we're going to be able to use it again for watering the lawn. It's not a technology that's new. It's been used for many, many years. I remember growing up, and the washing machine put the water out on the lawn.
Yeah.
It didn't go into the sewer. So
It's a lot simpler, but same concept.
But
Don't let it go to waste.
And to just touch one slightly on reuse and direct potable reuse. There are many countries in the Middle East that utilize every drop of water at least 8 times.
Wow.
So it's going through that cycle that many times. One of the technology things that is a spin-off to some degree is the space program. Currently at the space station and the shuttle, they used reuse or reclaimed water. There's no pipeline to the space station.
So McAllen and NASA side by side.
Well, and a lot of the technology has come out of the Middle East because of need. I mean,
Right.
Here we are selling water at $1.35. They're selling water at $12.50.
Wow.
It's much more expensive because of the process that they have to go through. Part of the portfolio that we're developing to diversify our water supply is groundwater and eventually desal. We currently have one well that serves the city that produces about 1 million gallons of water a day.
I bet folks don't know that.
Well, and they don't, but we're looking at installing a well field in the future. Mm-hmm. And groundwater is clean water. It's just a little bit higher salt in a lot of areas than even river water is. And so the more you utilize, the more you have to extract the salt. But there are many people that are looking at desal along the Gulf Coast as a water source for the future.
Excellent. So McAllen Public Utility obviously looking very far into the future, lots of exciting things happening.
You bet.
You kind of brushed on us coming out of stage 2, which we've been in for years. So tell us a little bit about why we lifted those restrictions.
Well, the primary reason that we lifted the restrictions is because of the lake levels. Water conservation in the city of McAllen is predicated and keyed on reservoir levels.
Right.
And
What
those
happens
are
over there affects us over here.
reservoir levels are based on U.S. ownership of water rights. We share the water in the Rio Grande with Mexico. We share the water in the 2 lakes with Mexico. We also have a treaty that allows Mexico to share the water off of the Colorado River, and we share water from the Colorado with Mexico. 90%, 95% of the water that falls into the Colorado falls in the United States. 95% of the water that goes into the Rio Grande comes off the mountains of Mexico.
Wow.
And Mexico has built a number of dams along the tributaries leading to the Rio Grande over the year, and that them filling those reservoirs has been in part why there has been the water debt for so many years. They're trying to hold back the water for their farmers and their people, and essentially only sharing when there's a deluge. We're getting into a little bit better sharing regime. They don't owe us a bunch of water, but thankfully we haven't had to deal with a flood situation like we did 8 years ago. And when we were in the deepest drought, the reservoir levels were down below 15%.
I remember doing a story out there, and I actually was standing at the boat ramp at Falcon Lake, and
no water.
No, I was like 15, 20 feet in, and the water was way back in the distance, like not even close to coming up to the boat ramp.
Both of the major on-air stations here in the valley have done a couple of stories in the last few weeks about the reservoir capacity. I think Tim may have gone all the way up to Eagle Pass and Amistad, and which is a great thing. Awareness is understanding where we get our water from. And the Rio Grande, few people really recognize that the Rio Grande originates up in Colorado, and it essentially bisects New Mexico down to El Paso. And if you look at the river flows, there's a high flow of water that finally gets to El Paso, and then it gets to a trickle beyond El Paso. El Paso used to discharge their water from their water reclamation plants into the Rio Grande. Now they pump it back upstream and put it into a series of wetlands that flow back into the Rio Grande, essentially indirect reuse. So they're recapturing all of that water that they used to send downstream, and that's exactly what we're going to do with McAllen. McAllen discharges from those reclamation plants in Pilot Channel of the floodway on the south and the Big Ditch on the north. And those waters go eventually to the Gulf via one direction or another. We're going to reclaim that water that otherwise we would, a major portion of that water, that otherwise would be going elsewhere and unused. So it goes back up to, south of El Paso, between El Paso and the confluence of the one of the major rivers in Mexico to the Rio Grande. It's oftentimes a dry riverbed.
Yeah.
And you get down to Amistad, where most of those waters come in, and of course right now the Devils and the Pecos are up quite a bit, which is good inflow into Amistad. Amistad is up from last week almost 5 feet.
Wow.
So that's millions of gallons of water. And so watching all of that, watching what happens in Mexico, all of those tributaries feeding into the Rio Grande is what we are dependent on. So in looking at that, we want to diversify our portfolio also, and that's one of the reasons why we're looking at reuse and groundwater desal.
But we still want folks to be wise with their water.
Yeah,
that doesn't go away.
Yeah, you don't don't just water the streets. Water your lawn.
Yeah.
Don't be wasteful. Be water smart, as the moniker was a number of years ago, and that hasn't changed. Audit your sprinkler systems to where you don't have the geyser, and of course, if you see a geyser,
we don't want a geyser.
talk to your neighbors or talk to us, and we'll provide people with a positive encouragement to be more water smart. But at this point in time, we don't have water police that are out there looking for people that are watering outside the hours, but we just ask people to be smart with the way that they consume our water, and that way we can have available water even when other communities don't.
And that's right, and that's what sets us apart. Charles Amos, thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you so much, Roxanne. It's a pleasure.
And we ask you to continue to be, as Charles Amos said, water smart. With this edition of Inside the PUB, I'm Roxanne Lerma.